Hello class and welcome to Chapter 6. In this chapter we're going to be talking about the SWOT analysis. So let's get started. The SWOT analysis is an acronym, SWOT, and each letter stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. You should have ran into this theory presented to you in previous classes, so this in some respects will be a review, but we're going to do a much more in-depth review of the SWOT analysis and how to actually put it together with quantitative numbers. What's important about the SWOT analysis is to realize that strengths and weaknesses refer to activities and functions within the organization, while opportunities and threats refer to activities or threats that take place outside the organization. The key to any good strategy is to understand the internal workings of your company, both those that are good and bad, and match those to the opportunities that are outside the organization while minimizing the risk to the various threats. So as you can see, when it comes to strategy formation, a SWOT analysis is very important. It's also important to note that no opportunity has any real value unless a company has a capacity to take advantage of that opportunity. So you're only as good as your ability to execute on your strategy. On this slide, we have a detailed look of a full SWOT analysis. I want to walk through each column with you so you understand how to put it together and the importance and significance of this approach and how it helps you to write out your strategies. Let's start with the column all the way at the left. You can see here that we have S, W, T, and O. These are your acronyms for SWOT analysis. So that anything that's an S stands for strength, W's are weaknesses, T's are threats, and O's are for opportunity. You want to identify at least anywhere from 2 to 5 strengths that the company has. Similarly, 3 to 5 weaknesses, 3 to 5 threats, and 3 to 5 opportunities. You don't really want to go over 5 because then your chart begins to get out of hand. As you can see in this particular chart, I limited strengths to 2, weaknesses to 2, and then 3 for opportunities and threats. The next column over is your activities column. Here's where you write out specifically what this opportunity or what this strength is. In this case, we wrote organizational culture. Let's take a look at the first weakness. Expensive. Isolation, a number of potential buyers. And weakness number 2, fractured internal operations. So you can see that what we're doing is we're providing a brief description to whatever corresponds to that strength, weakness, opportunities, or threats. Let's take a look at the next column, the rating column. The rating tells us how well that company is currently executing against this particular activity. If they're doing a really good job, then give them a rating of 5. If they're doing a poor job, then give them a rating of down to 1. But anywhere from 1 to 5, with 5 being you're doing a great job and 1 being that you're doing a very poor job. This tells how well the company is actually executing against this particular activity. Let's move to the next column. Weight. This is where you actually apply a weighting to how important this criteria is for success in the industry. In other words, how important is this criteria for any organization to be successful in the industry? It's also important to note that at the bottom of this column, all the numbers should total to 1. So we apply the weighting to each of these criteria and all the way down and make sure that it sums to 1. The next thing we do in the column to the right is we do a weighted score. This is where we take the rating and multiply it by the weight, and that gives us a weighted score. And this is important. We do this for every column going down across all categories. The next 3 columns we have tell us whether this is a short-term activity, in other words, meaning that it needs to be dealt with and addressed very quickly within the next 12 months. Intermediate, whether it needs to be done in the next 12 months to 5 years. Or long-term, whether you could wait more than 5 years or so to actually execute this particular activity. So you go along to each activity and you indicate whether it's short, intermediate, or long-term. From there, we can now begin to take a look at the overall SWOT analysis and begin to derive what we should focus on for our most immediate strategy. So here you want to identify the highest weighted scores. These are the activities that are the most important. So you can see the highest score we have here is 0.85. The next highest we have is 0.34. And then for the third, we actually have three items that all fall into a 0.3. The important thing here is we want to use the weighted score to identify activities that we want to move on quickly. We want to move on to the next 12 months, which means the short-term category and the intermediate category are the most two important categories for us to look at. If you look here at brand name, the company's been doing well at it. It's important for the industry. This is their highest weighted score, but this is also long-term. So we want to remove that from our consideration and focus primarily on activities that we want to exploit for our strategy on things that are short-term and intermediate that have a high weighted score. In this case, we have 4 items that fit that category. You want to centralize your strategic activities and recommendations around these 4 criteria in this case. Now, while a SWOT analysis is very important and is very helpful in terms of allowing us to organize our thoughts around what a company should be doing, what's important, what we should move on first, it's important to note that it also has some limitations. So generally speaking, here are a few limitations or criticisms of the SWOT analysis. I'm not going to go through all of these because you could take time to read them, but I will point out a couple. One, SWOT analysis when done in this form tends to generate pretty lengthy lists, which people can get lost in. This is why I would say you want to limit it to 2 to 5 criteria per each category, each S, W, O, and T. Sometimes the same factor can apply both the strength and the weakness. So we want to be careful that we delineate categories accordingly. And if we're going to say something is both a strength and a weakness, that we clearly understand what that is and how we want to exploit it. And also, one of the big criticisms is that many companies may go through the activities of doing a SWOT analysis, but then don't actually tie it to the strategy that they're using. So it's important that you look across those items with the highest weighted average and then use those to develop your strategic action. And then you want to make sure they get implemented within the organization. That wraps it up for this lecture here on SWOT analysis. I hope you learned something. And thank you, and we'll catch you next time. If you have any questions, be sure to email them or see me in class if we have a physical class. Thank you, and you have a good day.